Power doesn't whisper, it detonates, and today, across the scorched borders of history, the detonation has begun. Israel has crossed a line not drawn in sand but carved in fire, and Iran, wounded, watching, waiting, may now choose the final move. This is not just another crisis. This is the edge of global reckoning. The air is thick with prophecy, and the world holds its breath. Every empire that plays with fire eventually burns in it. It begins subtly, always an assumption, a belief that the throne is eternal, that power is fixed, and that history will always bend in your favor. But power is not a throne. It is a storm. It doesn't sit still. It moves, it shifts, and it turns on those who grow arrogant within it. Israel, in its moment of calculated aggression, believes it can strike without awakening something older, darker, more dangerous than it imagines. It believes its alliances will hold, that its weapons will intimidate, that its strategies will keep chaos at bay. This is the ancient delusion of every empire before the fall. Rome thought the barbarians were nothing. Persia believed its size alone would protect it. Napoleon laughed at the cold. Hitler mocked the East. And each time, the fire they lit burned their own holes. Because what they misunderstood, and what Israel is dangerously forgetting, is that when you provoke forces beyond your comprehension, you do not control the fire. You become part of it. Israel has crossed a threshold, not just militarily, but symbolically. It has tested the limits of the world's patience, of regional equilibrium, of religious and historical tension, so thick you can cut it with a whisper. They believe they are playing a game of strategy, but the game has shifted. This is no longer about borders. This is about legacy, about centuries of pain, pride, prophecy, and vengeance, all bubbling under the surface like a volcano long overdue. And when that pressure breaks, it won't be a border dispute. It will be a reckoning. Iran watches not with noise, but with calculation. The West misreads silence. It sees restraint as weakness, patience as hesitation. But Iran's silence is the calm before a script rewritten in blood. A nation that endured wars, sanctions, isolation. It has already adapted to pain. It has already tasted the worst. Which means now, when it moves, it will not blink, and it will not stop. The lesson here is old, but it must be learned again. You cannot light a fire at your enemy's door and expect the wind to obey you. The moment Israel unleashed its latest blow, brazen, deliberate, symbolic, it forgot what power really is. Power is not just what you hold in your hands. It is what others believe you hold. It is the perceptions you manage, the emotions you provoke, the restraint you show before the sword is drawn. And this trigger showed the world that Israel is no longer restraining itself. It showed that the rules have changed. That lines once feared are now crossed, and once they are crossed, you cannot uncross them. That is how wars begin. Not with armies, but with the erasure of boundaries, boundaries of reason, boundaries of diplomacy, boundaries of what we think the other side won't dare to do. Israel believes the world will back it, that the systems it relies on, diplomatic, military, psychological, will absorb the consequences. But the world is shifting. The global chessboard is unstable. Allies are not as loyal as they were a decade ago. Enemies are more unified than ever. Technology has democratized power, and asymmetry has replaced traditional warfare. The underdog no longer bleeds quietly. It strikes where it hurts, and Iran, the ancient lion with centuries of imperial blood in its veins, knows exactly where to strike. This is not about choosing sides. It is about recognizing the moment, recognizing when the scale tips from strategy to desperation. When fear begins to override logic, when empires begin to think they are untouchable, that's when they fall. And history won't whisper when it writes this chapter. It will roar. The smoke signals are in the sky. The world feels the tremble. The leaders pretend it's still under control. but deep down, everyone knows we've entered a phase where one move, just one, could ignite something irreversible. And in this phase, arrogance is not a strength, it is the rope by which empires hang themselves. Israel has played with fire. Now the fire plays with everyone. Provocation is not strength, it is a dare to destiny. There is a difference between strength and spectacle, and far too often, those who wield power mistake one for the other. They provoke because they can. They provoke because no one has stopped them yet. But provocation is not the display of dominance they imagine it to be. It is a signal, a flare, a challenge thrown into the abyss with no certainty of what will rise to meet it. The ones who provoke in public are often the ones trembling in private, because they know that true strength does not need to shout. It does not need to flaunt, it simply is. When Israel decided to escalate, to strike beyond what had long been unspoken limits, it was not showing strength. It was issuing a dare, not just to Iran, but to the entire balance of power that has, for years, kept the region from complete collapse. It poked the sleeping lions of ancient rage, historic injustice, religious fire, and national pride. And the mistake, the fatal mistake, was believing that those lions would stay asleep. You do not slap a ghost and expect silence. You do not walk into a graveyard of old wars and kick the dust of the fallen, thinking there will be no answer. Provocation calls to the worst in humanity. It stirs the poison, the ancient hatreds, the dark oaths sworn in blood and passed down in whispers. And in this moment, that call has been heard. Iran is not a country that responds to provocation with immediate fireworks. That's the language of fools. Iran waits, it calculates, it watches how the world reacts, it watches who flinches, who speaks, who stays silent, and then, when the moment is right, when everyone least expects it, it answers. Not emotionally, not impulsively, but strategically, surgically, devastatingly, because provocation only works if your opponent is scared or unprepared. And Iran is neither. This is where Israel misjudged the field. They believed a strike would send a message of invincibility. Instead, it sent a message of insecurity, because when a nation truly holds power, it doesn't provoke, it compels. When it truly commands fear, it doesn't need to scream across borders. It whispers, and the world listens. Israel screamed, and in doing so exposed its own sense of fragility. The West, too, often confuses provocation with strength. It watches the explosion and applauds the fireworks, but provocation is easy. Any fool with a weapon can make noise. Real power is restraint. Real control is knowing when not to strike, when not to rise to the bait, and when to let your silence become more terrifying than any missile. But provocation does something more dangerous than just igniting a potential war. It forces everyone else to choose. It corners the global stage. It says, pick a side, even when the audience isn't ready. And when enough nations are pulled into that corner by alliance, by ideology, by fear, the world starts drawing lines not just in words, but in arms. That's how world wars begin, not because one nation wanted it, but because one provocation forced the entire board to react. We are watching a high-stakes game with unstable hands. The difference now is that every move is made in public. Every provocation is filmed, tweeted, broadcast, weaponized. Leaders no longer act from cold calculation alone. They act for spectacle, for ego, for fear of appearing weak. And nothing is more dangerous than a leader who is more afraid of seeming weak than of unleashing war. This is the moment in history when the illusion of strength becomes more lethal than actual strength, because it dares destiny to respond, and destiny does not play favorites. It does not forgive recklessness. It watches the provocateur with cold indifference, waiting to see if they truly understand what they've summoned. Most never do until it's too late. You can provoke once, maybe twice, but the third time awakens something unstoppable, because you do not know how close your enemies are to the edge. You do not know what they've lost in silence, what they've built in secret, what they're willing to sacrifice, and when that pressure finally erupts, it will not be a response. It will be a transformation. The world will not go back to how it was, and that's the danger of provocation. It tempts fate, and fate never forgets. When you dare destiny, destiny dares you back. The illusion of control is the prelude to collapse. In every age, in every empire, at every turning point in history, you will find this fatal miscalculation, the belief that control has been achieved, that systems are stable, that the machinery of power is oiled and predictable, but power is never static. It is a wild animal, tamed only briefly before it breaks free again. Slips through their FLAVO fingers. Israel, right now, is under the influence of this illusion. It believes it is steering the storm, navigating the chaos, controlling the outcome. It believes that with each drone strike, each targeted assassination, each geopolitical maneuver, it is shaping the future. But what it is really doing is stacking kindling around its feet, because the moment you believe you have mastered the game changes its rules. The illusion of control is seductive. It tells you that your dominance is permanent, that your alliances are unbreakable, that your enemies are too divided, too slow, too weak to matter. But all of this, every ounce of it, is a lie comforted by temporary victories. The illusion is not maintained by truth. It is maintained by repetition, by ritual, by echo chambers of advisors who repeat what leaders want to hear. They speak of deterrence, of precision, of measured responses, but the world outside the strategy rooms is not measured. It is emotional, volatile, ancient. Iran understands this better than most. It does not pretend the world is neat. It doesn't try to control everything. It prepares for when control collapses. It operates in shadows, networks, proxies, and long games. It knows that a state that believes itself invulnerable will eventually overreach, and when that overreach comes, the ground under it will break like ice. The tragedy of power is that those who gain it often forget its cost. They forget the sacrifices, the cunning, the patience it took to get there. They start thinking they deserve it, that they own it, that it is a natural extension of their will. And from that moment forward, they start building a reality that no longer matches the world, a fantasy, a myth, and the longer they live in that myth, the harder the crash when the truth arrives. Look closely at what is unfolding now. Israel believes it can strike and still manage the fallout, that it can provoke Iran and still dictate the terms of the response, that it can play in the margins of escalation without ever slipping into the abyss. This is not strategy. This is hubris wrapped in spreadsheets, a confidence born from years of unchecked dominance. But dominance is not control. They are not the same. Control is fragile. It can be shattered by a single miscalculation, a single missile, a single unexpected alliance forming in the dark. In the moment that shattering begins, all the plans, all the doctrine, all the confidence turns into panic, because when you realize you were never in control, that the stage was bigger than you imagined, that your enemies were more patient than you assumed, it's already too late. There is something deeply dangerous about modern warfare. The belief that technology equals control. That drones, satellites, cyber operations give one side the edge forever. But technology cannot predict human rage. It cannot track centuries of grief. It cannot override the fury of a population who sees its past erased and its future threatened. And when you cannot predict the human heart, you cannot control the battlefield. We are at the tipping point now. The world is being led by people who have mistaken command for control, who have confused structure with certainty. But no structure survives a storm if it was built on denial. And denial is exactly what we are seeing from leaders who pretend this situation can be contained, who believe that lines can be redrawn without consequences, that enemies can be humiliated without retaliation, that chaos can be unleashed and then politely dismissed. It is in this moment, when the illusion starts to crack, that we must look at the truth directly. This is not sustainable. The actions taken in recent weeks are not part of a controlled strategy. They are symptoms of desperation, of a deeper unraveling that no one wants to admit. And if they continue down this path, they will lose more than power. They will lose the very systems they thought they had mastered. Collapse is not sudden. It begins with blindness, with leaders who mistake silence for submission, who believe their grip is firm when it is already slipping. And once the illusion shatters, all that's left is the rubble of decisions made under the false assumption that someone, somewhere, still had control. Iran doesn't threaten with noise. It waits with silence, then strikes with precision. Power that must announce itself is power on the brink of insecurity. The loudest ones on the stage are rarely the most dangerous. They perform for the cameras, for the news cycles, for the appearance of dominance. But true power, real power, moves differently. It moves in silence, it watches, it calculates, and when it strikes, it does not miss. Iran is not in the business of theatrics. It is in the business of memory, revenge, and precision. The world often misreads Iran. It sees a nation surrounded by pressure, sanctions, isolation, regional enemies, and assumes weakness. It assumes desperation, but Iran is not desperate. It is patient. It has turned suffering into strategy, isolation into endurance, and when a nation has learned to breathe under pressure, it no longer fears the air above it. Iran has trained itself in the shadows. While others projected their might with bluster and media, Iran built networks, proxies, alliances, not loud but loyal. Not flashy but functional. Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, the militias in Iraq and Syria. These are not scattered pieces. These are instruments, extensions of a strategy decades in the making. And while Israel, the West, and its allies play the surface game of headlines, Iran plays a deeper one based on culture, religion, identity, and time. Iran's weapons are not just military, they are psychological, philosophical, the kind of power that digs into the soil of people's minds and waits there until the moment to bloom into fire. When Iran is silent, it is not sleeping, it is studying, it is letting others show their hand, letting others commit the first mistake. The world watched this unfold when Israel crossed the line, when it struck deep, a move calculated to provoke, to destabilize, to dominate the narrative. But Iran did not rush, it did not react with noise, it didn't deliver a fireworks show, because Iran understands what so many forget, that reaction is often what your enemy wants. And if you give them what they want, you are no longer playing your game. You are playing theirs. Iran doesn't play for applause. It plays for leverage. It plays for legacy. The leaders in Tehran are not thinking about tomorrow's headline. They are thinking about what the map will look like 10 years from now. And that kind of vision doesn't flinch. It waits for the opponent to walk far enough into the trap. Because then, when the strike comes, it is not seen as retaliation. It is seen as inevitability. Silence is one of the deadliest weapons in war. Because silence unnerves, it creates paranoia. While Israel celebrates its so-called victories, it is looking over its shoulder. Every general, every diplomat, every soldier in uniform knows that something is coming, they just don't know when or where. That is Iran's advantage. The battlefield is psychological long before it is physical, and Israel now lives in a state of tension not because Iran shouted, but because it didn't. And when Iran does respond, because it will, It won't be for spectacle. It won't be to satisfy public rage. It will be to change the equation, to redraw the boundaries of what is acceptable, and that response will echo not just in Israel, but across every nation that underestimated the value of silence. Because that is what this moment is, a lesson, a reminder that the world's most dangerous powers are not always the ones shouting at the podium, but the ones who speak in actions, not threats. This is how balance shifts, slowly at first, then all at once. Iran knows this because it has studied the collapse of powers. It has survived betrayals. It has watched empires rise, bully, fall, and vanish. It has survived Saddam, endured war with the West, navigated sanctions that would have crippled other nations. And it is still standing, not just standing, but evolving. The real fear in Israel is not what Iran says. It's what Iran is becoming. It is the feeling that the enemy they once mocked is now playing the long game with frightening clarity, that while Israel tried to dominate by force, Iran influenced hearts. While Israel sought loyalty through power, Iran gained it through purpose. And in the coming storm, loyalty and purpose will do more than missiles ever could. This moment isn't about who has the bigger arsenal. It's about who has the deeper resolve, who has shaped the battlefield not just with weapons, but with silence, with patience, with meaning. Iran has chosen to wait, not because it is afraid, but because it is choosing its moment. And when that moment comes, it will not just strike back. It will remind the world that silence was never weakness. It was a countdown. Every conflict begins as local, but when fire spreads in a dry forest, it doesn't need permission to consume what lies beyond. What began as a confrontation between Israel and Iran is no longer theirs alone. The lines are being drawn faster than they can be erased. Powers are positioning themselves. Allies are speaking with vague language that masks preparation. Enemies are watching, calculating what this conflict gives them permission to do. And the world, as always, is dancing on a knife's edge, pretending this is a distant fire when the wind is already carrying embers across their borders. This is not a war of two nations. This is a test of the international order, a test of whether decades of suppressed resentment, fractured treaties, wounded identities, and cold alliances can hold under real pressure. Because that is what's coming, real pressure, the kind of pressure that doesn't just shake military bases but shakes the conscience of entire continents. The kind that turns neutral ground into battlegrounds and old enemies into reluctant allies. Already, we are seeing the gravitational pull of war. The U.S. is speaking in terms of support and containment. But history has shown us that support always turns into presence. Presence into engagement, engagement into escalation, and once that door opens, it doesn't close quietly. Russia is watching this closely, not simply because it benefits from chaos, but because it understands the rhythm of global disorder. It knows the value of distraction, the value of watching others burn while you advance elsewhere. China, though quieter, sees opportunity too, not in war, but in weakening the Western grip, in watching the United States stretch itself thinner across yet another theater. And while others throw missiles, China moves with contracts, influence, debt, and infrastructure. Because war is not only fought with bullets, it is fought with time, money, and the promise of a new order. That is the battlefield China prefers, and chaos gives it cover to move. Even Europe, fractured and divided, feels the tremors. It remembers what World War means. It remembers the cost of underestimating how fast regional fire becomes a global blaze. But memory alone does not equal readiness. Europe's leaders speak of diplomacy while quietly revising their emergency plans, their energy supplies, their military readiness. They understand that if this escalates, truly escalates, the luxury of distance disappears. Missiles don't care about borders when alliances are involved. And this is the key point. Alliances, that ancient trap wrapped in noble language. One nation falls, another responds. One ally is struck, the treaty demands action, and with every response the web pulls tighter, until what began as 2 becomes 10. What was a retaliation becomes a campaign. And the war everyone thought could be managed becomes unmanageable. This is not prophecy, this is pattern. We've seen it before. Sarajevo, Poland, Kuwait. Every world war started with a belief that it could be contained, that others would stay out, that cooler heads would prevail. But war, once born, grows without permission. And it finds the cracks in the system, the places where leadership hesitates, where populations are angry, where regimes are ready for a distraction, or a cause, or a reason to rise. Iran knows this, Israel knows this, the United States knows this, but knowing is not the same as stopping. Because pride plays its part too. No nation wants to be seen backing down, no leader wants to be remembered as the one who blinked. And in that pride fed by media, by public expectation, by fear, comes the march towards something far greater than any of them intended. And if this march continues, it will not be fought in deserts alone. It will spill into cyberspace, into oil prices, into food chains, into migration, into riots and elections and collapsing economies. War today is not fought in one place. It is fought everywhere, and the next world war will not be neatly divided into fronts and factions. It will be chaos, simultaneous, digital and physical, silent and deafening, the kind of war no one is ready for, but everyone will feel. So this is where we are, on the edge not just of a new war, but a new era, one where the old rules no longer protect us, where power is shifting not just between nations, but between systems of thought, between ideologies, between truths, between what we are willing to endure and what we are no longer willing to ignore. If we continue to pretend this is a regional conflict, we will lose the global game, and by the time we wake up, we won't be counting casualties, we'll be counting what's left to rebuild. The fire has already started. Now the world must decide, will it act before the flames reach its own doors, or will it simply watch until there are no doors left? There is a moment in every great upheaval when the question becomes not who is winning, but who is willing to survive differently. When systems begin to break, when alliances fray, when the rules once written in stone dissolve into sand, those who rise are not the ones holding on to old victories, but those ruthless enough to redefine what victory even means. We are entering that moment now. This is no longer about borders, missiles, sanctions, or speeches. This is now about transformation, about what the world will look like when this fire burns through the illusion of control, the illusion of diplomacy, and the illusion of permanence. Because permanence was always the biggest lie. Nothing lasts, not empires, not treaties, not even the memories of peace. What lasts is the instinct to adapt, to survive, to shape what comes after the fall. Look closely at the players now. Iran is not just striking back, it is reshaping its identity on the world stage. No longer content with being cast as the defiant outlier, it is stepping into a more central role, the challenger of a world order that dismissed it, demonized it, and underestimated its resilience. And it is not doing this alone. Others are watching and learning, nations tired of dancing to Western rhythms, powers waiting in silence for the music to change. This war, because we must now call it what it is not just about retaliation. It is about rewriting the script. Iran knows that the old system was never built to accommodate its voice. It was built to silence it. So now, with every strike, every calculated silence, every proxy moved across the board, it is not just fighting Israel, it is fighting the myth that the world cannot be remade, That myth is dying, and its death is shaking the foundations of every capital, every think tank, every war room that still believes stability is possible through force alone. But do not mistake this transformation for chaos. Chaos is what happens to those who resist change, to those who cling to outdated visions of power, to those who think the next war will be like the last one, or that old alliances will hold firm in the face of new truths. The world we are entering demands a different kind of clarity, a clarity born not from tradition, but from ambition, from the willingness to see opportunity inside destruction. That is why Iran does not fear the fire. It understands what fire does. Fire purifies. It consumes the weak structures, the hollow declarations, the fragile illusions. What remains is essence. What remains is what can truly withstand heat. And Iran believes it is that essence, that it was forged in fire and therefore cannot be undone by it. That belief is dangerous, not because it is loud, but because it is quiet and unwavering. On the other side, Israel is now forced to reconsider its entire strategy. It has long operated with the certainty of technological superiority, of iron alliances, of assumed impunity. But those pillars are cracking. What was once a theater of calculated responses has become a minefield of unpredictability. Each strike brings less clarity, not more. Each move exposes a new vulnerability, and beneath it all is the creeping fear that the balance of power is not just shifting, it is being replaced, because power today is not just about what you can destroy. It is about what you can endure, about what you can inspire, about what kind of future you are building while others are trying to survive the present. That is where the game is headed now, not to conquest, but to construction. Not to dominance, but to design. And whoever understands this first will not just win, they will define what the new world looks like. This is the real endgame, not bombs, not sanctions, but systems, narratives, structures. If this war continues, if it truly spills over into something greater, and make no mistake it already is, then the prize is not territory. The prize is legacy, influence, a say in how the world recovers, what order rises from the ashes, and who gets to lead it. Some will try to restore the old world. They will cling to it, beg for it, even kill for it, but restoration is a myth. You cannot go back. You cannot rewind a clock that was always ticking toward fracture. Those who understand this will evolve, and those who don't will be left behind powerless, confused, trapped in the ruins of a time that no longer exists. So ask yourself, when the dust clears, what side of history do you want to be on? The side that held on too long, or the side that shaped what came next? Because history doesn't remember those who shouted the loudest. It remembers those who stayed standing when the world changed and knew exactly what to do next.